Uh, Good morning, everyone. Uh, for today's class, I'm inviting Dr. Ashavari Patil, madam. Madam is a professor in Department of Pathology. Madam will be taking a class on the histopathological diagnosis and dilemmas in making the diagnosis of squamous cell carcinoma. So, I welcome you, ma'am. Ma'am, please go ahead with the presentation.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Poonam. And so I'll try to stick to only squamous cell carcinomas, although I'm going to show some interesting cases. So I'll share my screen.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you see it?
Yes, ma'am. We can see it.
Right. So, okay. So today's topic is squamous cell carcinomas, histological diagnosis and dilemmas. So the point is that I know that I am talking to most of your surgeons, so I'll try to stick to clinical part, but you are going to get a lot of pictures which you are not used to see that, but this is just to make you aware of what we are going through and why sometimes we have to ask for more material. So this is for teaching purpose. This is a disclaimer, and it includes our own cases as well as from some of the pictures from standard textbooks or some manuscripts, and no conflict of interest. And the objectives of today's lecture is mainly we are going to comment on a brief comment on histology, a brief comment on hyperplasia and his precursor lesions, histological diagnosis of squamous cell carcinoma, including all the variants, and then pitfalls and dilemmas with some interesting cases. I'm going to just briefly talk about standard reporting of squamous cell carcinoma, especially in oral cavity. So this you know very well, head neck squamous cell carcinoma is sixth most common cancer worldwide. And role of pathologist mainly is for biopsy, which is primary diagnosis. FNAC is not for primary diagnosis, not even scrapings. So biopsy, that's what we need for primary diagnosis. Why we need biopsy, I'll explain you later. We also take, we are also involved in frozen section. And then finally, when you send us resection specimen, we try to we try to assess the state and prognosis and all the mandatory parameters that are required that are needed by an oncologist to decide the treatment. We also sometimes comment on biomarkers and molecular tests, although I must tell you in squamous cell carcinoma, there are not too many, except for, as you know, P16 is one of this, is not a biomarker, but you need it for oropharyngeal squamous cell carcinoma. So histology wise, the reason I am going to tell you about histology in brief, because unless you know histology, you will not be able to understand what is invasive carcinoma and what is dysplasia. So actually normal mucosa has three layers, which is squamous epithelium, lamina propria, and submucosa, and which looks something like this. As you see here, this is kind of a wavy one. It is a squamous mucosa. This is epithelium. This is squamous epithelium. This is the normal thickness of squamous epithelium. Then we have this lamina propria. There is subepithelial tissue, and this lowermost portion is minor salivary gland. So this is what we expect to see when we get a biopsy from a benign oral mucosa lesion. Now, obviously, we are not going to get normal mucosa usually in a biopsy, because you are not going to biopsy that. Again, this is higher magnification. This is what we are looking for. This is called it as a maintenance of polarity. What does it mean? Then we have this epithelium, the full thickness. We have a basement membrane which is intact, which is very important to know whether it is intact or not, because invasive carcinoma usually invades through this basement membrane in the stroma or lamina propria beneath. And then as we see, you can see here, as the cells go up, they are becoming more flattened, and this is called maturation. And this is what we are looking for, that this is normal matured squamous epithelium with an intact basement membrane and the thickness is normal. So if we see this, this is perfectly normal mucosa. Now, many times when you send us a biopsy, we call it as hyperplastic squamous mucosa. Now, what do you mean by hyperplastic squamous mucosa? It is increasing layers of squamous cells or numbers of squamous cells in the overlying epithelium. And that can be like a diffuse plaque-like thickening, that can be pseudoepitheliomatous, that can be papillary. We can see parakeratosis, hyperkeratosis, many things are involved. So this is, as now if you remember the previous epithelium, this is quite thick. This is hyperplastic epithelium. This is again hyperplastic epithelium with all these infiltrating edges, but that's not a carcinoma. This is perfectly benign epithelium, polarity maintained. There are no features of malignancy in the cells lining this mucosa. Now, next thing which we get is precancerous lesion in oral cavity. Now, there's a big list. If you see clinically, there are many conditions which are really included under oral potentially malignant disorders as per WHO 2017 book. And these are usually clinically definable precursor lesions, or it sometimes can appear a little bit of normal mucosa, and overall malignant transformation rate is 1 to 2%. Now, what are the factors what the pathologist is looking for which can predict and tell you that there is high risk of transformation of malignancy? One is presence of dysplasia, because the transformation rate almost is 12%. Now you have this, all of you know better than us, this clinical parameters where you think this is not something just hyperplastic, this is going to be worse than that. And that time you usually biopsy that lesion. There's another lesion, proliferative verrucous leukoplakia. We are going to talk about it also. So when we look for dysplasia, now I have shown you what is normal mucosa, I have shown you what is hyperplasia. When we look for dysplasia, it is there are changes in the architecture and there are changes in these individual cells which lead to all these features of dysplasia, and these are caused by accumulation of genetic changes. And these are associated with increased risk of progression to squamous cell carcinoma. There are various factors we look for. There is abnormal growth, there is cytology, or that nuclei are that they are not normal looking, they look malignant, or they look atypical, not always malignant. Then there are architectural abnormalities, maturation, which I showed you earlier, that is lost. And more the severe dysplasia, more likelihood of malignant transformation. So dysplasia is a pre-malignant lesion. The chances of malignant transformation are more in severe dysplasia and lowest in mild dysplasia. But let me tell you, there is inter-observer variation in grading dysplasia as well. So sometimes some people have suggested it should be two-tier grading system, low grade, high grade. But at this point, we are following only three-tier system, that is mild, moderate, and severe dysplasia. So mild, as you know, it is minimal cytologic atypia. Moderate is somewhere in between mild and severe. Severe is going to be almost entire epithelium abnormal. And carcinoma in situ is something we see all features of malignancy except the cells are limited by basement membrane. If it doesn't invade basement membrane, it is still carcinoma in situ. It is not invasive carcinoma. And this is just a picture that shows you what we look for. Normal is something like this, nice maturation. Hyperplasia, thickness increases. Dysplasia, we see there are the cells. If you can see, compare with the nuclei are quite bigger in this. They are disorganized. They are not orderly placed. And when we call it invasive carcinoma, if you see this basement membrane, here the basement membrane is breached, you see the tumor is going down. This is what we are looking for in a biopsy. If we get that, then and then only we can call it as a squamous cell carcinoma. So I'm just going to show you some pictures of mild dysplasia. Mild dysplasia, many times it becomes difficult to call it as mild dysplasia or normal. They are difficult to differentiate from normal epithelium. The features are mainly limited to only the lowest, lower 1/3 of epithelium. Then moderate dysplasia is like almost 2/3 of epithelium shows nuclear enlargement and disorganized nuclear. And this is severe dysplasia. If you compare with the previous normal epithelium, you can see that the nuclear disorderly places, they are quite big, they are quite dark. That is called hyperchromasia, nuclear enlargement. All these things, when we see, we call it as severe dysplasia. But you can see here the basement membrane is intact. This is carcinoma in situ. There's one more picture I'll show you. Carcinoma in situ. It perfectly looks like a squamous cell carcinoma, but the basement membrane is intact. So we don't see any invasion, and we are not going to call it as invasive carcinoma. So you will get a report like either severe dysplasia or carcinoma in situ. Invasion is not identified. But usually in these cases, we try to go for serial deep cuts. Even for hyperplasia or mild dysplasia, sometimes we go for severe serial deep cuts to see if there are any areas of invasive carcinoma, if at all required. There is another lesion called as proliferative verrucous leukoplakia. Now, this is another form of distinct aggressive form of OPMD and associated with high recurrence and malignant transformation. And the spectrum includes on one end, there is verrucous hyperplasia only. At the worst end, the other end is development of verrucous carcinoma when it is going to be called as frank carcinoma. Now, this is very important. Now, I'm going to spend some time on verrucous lesion because that's always we are facing some problem while diagnosing them in a biopsy. These verrucous lesions, they need to be differentiated from papillary lesions. They need to be differentiated from well-differentiated squamous cell carcinoma and also from papillary variant of squamous cell carcinoma. I'm sorry, this is papillary variant of squamous cell carcinoma. So just a few words about verrucous hyperplasia. It is clinically indistinguishable many times from verrucous carcinoma, and that's why you give us biopsy. And many times on biopsy also, we cannot tell you whether it is carcinoma versus hyperplasia because many times both hyperplasia and verrucous hyperplasia and verrucous carcinoma can coexist. It may appear as leukoplakia, and verrucous hyperplasia can develop either into verrucous carcinoma or conventional squamous cell carcinoma. That's why we are looking for excised specimen because you need to sample extensively to make sure that you are not missing a conventional, well-differentiated squamous cell carcinoma. There are multiple histological variants, mainly sharp and blunt, and this I want to spend some time on this figure. As you see on the left-hand side, this is the normal epithelium. This is a picture that shows development of verrucous hyperplasia and carcinoma. This is the normal epithelium. You can see this is showing this projections, outward projections, that's called papillae, and these are sharp, or sometimes they can be blunt projections. So this entire thing, S and B, these are all termed as verrucous hyperplasia. Now C is verrucous carcinoma, and how do we diagnose that? If you look at this, this is called as basement membrane, the lowermost end of normal epithelium. And if you draw a line along the basement membrane, as you see here, verrucous carcinoma usually looks like a normal hyperplastic, verrucous hyperplastic mucosa, but it is usually going below this basement membrane into the deep tissue. Now, obviously, in a biopsy, we cannot see that. That's the reason why we ask for, like we usually say that verrucous hyperplasia is seen on the biopsy, but we cannot exclude carcinoma unless and until we sample more lesion. So in any lesion, to call it as verrucous carcinoma, we need to see adjacent mucosa with basement membrane. If it is going deep into the basement, deeper tissue, it is going to be verrucous carcinoma. Now, when you give the biopsy, it is going to be sometimes on this lesion, from this area, even from this or this area. In any case, we cannot see what we have seen here. We cannot see whether it is going deeper down or not. So diagnosis of verrucous carcinoma on a biopsy is a difficult thing for us. And many times you end up getting this report as verrucous hyperplasia. I hope I made this clear to you. This is a practical problem. Many times you have to give us excision specimen if it is clinically indicated. If you can excise the lesion, we can sample it extensively and look for any tumor going down. Now, sometimes this deeper lesion can show invasive carcinoma, regular type, like any conventional type, which can be well-differentiated carcinoma. So all these things can be missed in this biopsy if it is taken from this area. This is just histological picture of verrucous hyperplasia. This I'm showing you how the hyperplasia looks like. The basement membrane is here. We have drawn a line here, and all the hyperplastic mucosa is above the basement membrane, not going deeper down. While if you see, this is one of our lesion, this is a big section. Obviously, you cannot provide this big biopsy. This is from resected specimen. We have this, as you see here, this is the basement membrane and the tumor is going beneath. It's almost, this is the smooth muscle beneath the mucosa, and tumor is almost reaching up to the smooth muscle as you see here. Here it is reaching down, deeper down, it is going down. So this is verrucous carcinoma. And that's how I would like to explain you why we need a bigger specimen or resected specimen to call it something as verrucous carcinoma. Now, verrucous carcinoma is extremely well differentiated squamous cell carcinoma. It is slowly growing, locally invasive tumor. The problem with diagnosis of verrucous carcinoma, because it lacks the histological features of malignancy. What do we call histological features of malignancy? It is the cytologic atypia. As I showed you earlier, those enlarged hyperchromatic dark nuclei. Then mitosis are seen, which may not be seen in verrucous carcinoma, usually in moderate to poorly differentiated carcinoma, sometimes in well-differentiated carcinoma also. We see some mitosis. And most important, infiltrative invasive pattern, which I'm going to show you later. So these things, because we cannot see these things, all that we have to see tumor going deep down. And usually it is broad pushing verrucous invagination, and invasion, recognition of invasion is difficult on biopsy. The challenges again is the same thing as I told you. Cytologic ATP is minimal, recognition of invasive is difficult. Many times there is exophytic growth. So when you take a biopsy, it comes from the superficial part and we don't know what is happening deep down. Again, fragmented biopsy is difficult to say whether it is invasive or not. And intact generous biopsy or excision specimen is usually required to demonstrate invasion. Differential diagnosis, again, or differential diagnosis of verrucous carcinoma includes verrucous hyperplasia on one end, and the other end is well-differentiated squamous cell carcinoma. So these two we have to differentiate from verrucous carcinoma, and a general specimen is required. Now, a few words about head and neck squamous cell carcinoma, other variants. So before we go for variants, so verrucous carcinoma is one of the variants of squamous cell carcinoma. Let's talk about the grading of carcinoma. How do we grade? The commonest grading system still used is well-differentiated, moderately differentiated, poorly differentiated. Now, what is well-differentiated is which closely resembles normal squamous mucosa or epithelium with atypia which is mild. Moderate is somewhere between well and poor, so it becomes a big basket. Anything which doesn't look like well-differentiated or poorly differentiated, it goes into moderately differentiated. While more poorly differentiated is marked cytologic atypia, and there is like we struggle a lot before we call it as squamous cell carcinoma for poorly differentiated squamous cell carcinoma. So resemblance to normal squamous epithelium is minimal. There is another grading system which was used previously, so broader grading system, but I don't think that is for you. It is important to remember it right now. This is well-differentiated squamous cell carcinoma, resemblance to normal squamous mucosa. You can see here, you can make out it is squamous, but at the same time, it is invading the deeper stroma, and there is some cytologic atypia. This is becoming worse, which is moderately differentiated squamous cell carcinoma. What I was talking about invasion is this. You see this small clusters, individual cells, they are infiltrating into stroma. It is not showing any basement membrane. This is haphazard infiltration. This is what we call it as invasion. Even if I see this portion of invasion, I can call it as invasive carcinoma. But if we don't get it in the biopsy, this portion also, then it becomes to call it as, then it becomes difficult to call it as invasive carcinoma. A poorly differentiated squamous cell carcinoma is another problem for us. Many times you don't see any resemblance to squamous cell carcinoma. Sometimes you do see some squamous areas, but many times there is no resemblance to squamous epithelium as such. So many times we see that we ask for immunohistochemistry, and after immunohistochemistry, we end up calling it as a squamous cell carcinoma. So invasion, identifying invasion is very important for squamous cell carcinoma. And how do we do that? There is loss of interface between epithelium and subepithelium. The basement membrane is broken. Architecture pattern is broken in the architecture pattern of basal layer is disturbed, and replacement of basal cells by large cells and the malignant looking cells, and there is a lot of stromal response. It is not a normal stroma. That's what I showed you earlier in normal histology. But then if the invasion is early, minimal invasion, then recognition can be subjective, and many times we end up talking to you. We should try to show the slides to our colleagues. We go deeper sections, and after deeper section, if we can call it invasive, we call it as squamous cell carcinoma. Now this is just to show you some examples. This is verrucous carcinoma. Now this invasion is difficult to identify. That's why we need a big specimen or big tissue to say whether it is going deeper down or not. You can see the basement membrane is still intact here, and there's maturation is somewhat maintained. But here it is all haphazard. And you can see the stroma is also showing some different morphology, different architecture. So this is all what is called as invasive carcinoma. This is verrucous carcinoma. If we see this invasion, we can call it as invasive carcinoma. Another picture showing you invasive carcinoma, a lot of stromal response is there. This is another picture of invasion. Now, this I'm just showing you, these are classical pictures of invasion. Although if we see a little bit small area of invasion, we are happy. Now, this I'm showing you just to show what happens when we get a biopsy. Now, this is a resected specimen. This is a full thickness of tumor. On the right-hand side here, this is the normal epithelium, adjacent epithelium. Here, the tumor is entirely seen involving the rest of the mucosa and deeper tissue and going down. Now, what happens is if I get a biopsy from here or from here, this is what you can give us. Sometimes we get invasion in this area. Sometimes we just see squamous mucosa with dysplasia. And that's how you end up getting this report, hyperplastic squamous mucosa or moderate dysplasia or severe dysplasia, whatever it is. I understand that you cannot go deep down this much to give us a perfectly invasive carcinoma. But fortunately, many times, even in deeper, the superficial areas, we do get nice invasion. Similarly, this is another section of tumor, normal mucosa. This is hyperplastic mucosa. This entire thing, you see these blue lines, between these two lines is tumor. Now, there are certain areas where there is invasion. Here, we may or may not identify invasion in the biopsy, but this is just to show you that it depends on from where you get the biopsy. Obviously, clinically also, it is difficult for you to say where is going to be invasion, but then we end up asking for more deeper biopsy and repeat biopsy. So I hope this explains you why pathologists ask for more deeper tissue. Differential diagnosis of squamous cell carcinoma are many. One is dysplasia or squamous carcinoma in situ. Second is pseudoepithelial matters hyperplasia. Cyalometaplasia is another condition, a rare one, which is a benign one, but that can really mimic squamous cell carcinoma. You don't need a wide resection for this, but this is something we want to avoid all the time. There are other tumors which need to be differentiated from squamous cell carcinoma. Minor salivary glands tumors and odontogenic tumors, we all know they usually the squamous mucosa is intact. So you also clinically you are aware of the fact that this doesn't look like squamous cell carcinoma, but sometimes these tumors can reach mucosa and ulcerate through it, where it causes problem, which I'm going to show you a few cases later on. Melanoma is one thing. If it's a melanotic melanoma, especially color, the clinically it may not look like melanoma. And when you get a biopsy, melanoma many times mimics squamous cell carcinoma. And many times when it is a poorly differentiated squamous cell carcinoma, we always throw some melanoma markers, sarcoma markers in that. Sometimes even lymphoma as well can be a differential diagnosis. So all these things, so last three diagnoses are differential diagnosis of poorly differentiated squamous cell carcinoma, while above two are like well to moderately differentiated squamous cell carcinoma need to be differentiated from this. This is just to show you cyalometaplasia. Necrotizing cyalometaplasia is an infiltrative lesion involving minor salivary gland. It can reach up to the mucosa. And in that case, this entire thing to us looks like an invasive carcinoma. Only thing is, when we call it as a carcinoma, we always look for, if it is showing architectural disturbance, which is here, we can see here in this lesion, and we have to see the nuclear features or the cytological features of malignancy which are absent in necrotizing cyalometaplasia. So we have to look at both the things, cytology and architecture. And here I want to tell you one more thing. Because cytology and architecture both are important in diagnosis of squamous cell carcinoma, just FNAC from some lesion cannot be helpful to differentiate between dysplasia, severe dysplasia versus squamous cell carcinoma. In FNAC, this architecture we cannot see. Now, if architecture is not seen, we cannot call it as invasive carcinoma. We end up calling dysplasia. So this is about necrotizing cyalometaplasia, which does not show any dysplastic features or cytological features of malignancy, but it shows architectural abnormality, which may be mistaken for squamous cell carcinoma. Necrotizing cyalometaplasia is benign self-limiting condition, and there is usually history of trauma, radiation surgery. We do get those cases, although not very common. And there are many other pathological features we really look for to diagnose it. But this thing I want to highlight, it's a bland looking metaplastic epithelium. It doesn't show any features of malignancy. Just comment on variants of squamous cell carcinoma. We have already seen verrucous carcinoma. Papillary variant of squamous cell carcinoma, again, it is one of the well-differentiated types. It is usually exophytic growth, so clinically you will see proliferative papillary lesion. And cytologic ATP, again, it may not be that bad, but we can clearly see some of the areas showing invasion. Now there is another variant, basaloid squamous cell carcinoma, which is very aggressive. Whenever we call it as basaloid squamous cell carcinoma, you have to remember that you are dealing with an aggressive variant of squamous cell carcinoma. It shows predilection for base of tongue, hypopharynx, and larynx. Now, the thing is that is mitotically very active, but many times we need to use immunohistochemistry for confirmation. Because as I told you, our differential diagnosis also includes sarcomas and then melanoma, sometimes neuroendocrine carcinoma and lymphoma. So all these things need to be differentiated from these tumors. Sometimes we can diagnose it on HND alone, but otherwise ISC markers are needed. HMWCK, P40. We usually use P63 for P40 commonly, but these are other two markers as well. And this is what I want to show you. Nowhere you can see that or diagnose it as a squamous cell carcinoma. All that we know that this is high-grade malignant tumor and it's probably a carcinoma. Mind well, a poorly differentiated adenocarcinoma can look like this. A high-grade neuroendocrine carcinoma, not always like this, but it can mimic. So all these things need to be remembered by a pathologist. And this is how we do the markers. And when the markers are positive, we call it as squamous cell carcinoma. Now it is a high-grade variant, and we have differential diagnosis includes high-grade adenocarcinoma, high-grade neuroendocrine carcinoma, not carcinoma. It can exactly look like one of the poorly differentiated carcinoma, as well as high-grade lymphoma. This is just, I'm going to show you NUT carcinoma. Now NUT carcinoma, it shows all markers of squamous cell carcinoma positive, but there is a specific marker, NUT protein, which is positive in this case. So this is a NUT carcinoma, histologically mimics poorly differentiated or basaloid squamous, usually poorly differentiated, not a basaloid one. Now sarcomatoid carcinoma, this is another thing, variant you commonly get this diagnosis, which is again a heterogeneous group of tumors. Usually it looks sarcomatoid on histopathology. Sometimes we do see nice carcinomatous features when we don't need any immunohistochemistry and we just call it as sarcomatoid carcinoma. But there are other times when you see osteosarcomatous area. rarely chondrosarcomatous area, rhabdomyosarcomatous area. And in that case, differentiation from osteosarcoma is essential when we see osteosarcomatous area. And then we use all these immunohistochemistry markers. And here I want to show you one of our cases. Sarcomatoid carcinoma is looks like any other sarcoma. Only thing this P53 or P40, which is a marker for squamous cell carcinoma, which is nicely positive in these tumors many times. Sometimes we don't get any marker positive, but then we have to go for other clues that it is involving mucosa, which is the commonest area for sarcomatoid carcinoma. So any sarcomatous tumor, even if the markers are negative, if it is involving mucosa, our first differential diagnosis is going to be sarcomatoid carcinoma. There are many benign as well as malignant conditions that we need to differentiate from sarcomatoid carcinoma, which is a big list here. Post-traumatic spindle cell nodule, radiation-induced fibrosis, spindle cell sarcoma, melanoma, myoepithelial carcinoma, and so on. These are some pictures which show you that all of them, they look alike. So in that case, we have to use some markers to call it as carcinoma. There are other variants which are not really of, we don't see that commonly in clinical practice, but we do get it in Tata, which include acantholytic or adenoid variant. Like this, it needs to be differentiated from adenocarcinoma and adenosquamous carcinoma. Sometimes angiosarcoma, we have to differentiate, so markers are needed. Adenosquamous carcinoma, which is a combination of adeno and squamous carcinoma, very rare, but you do get it, and it's an aggressive tumor. And as we see here, this is a squamous component of the carcinoma, and you can see nice glands here. This is adenocarcinoma, adenosquamous carcinoma. Now, other features, other differential diagnosis and other variants are not going to be that much clinically important, like those with clear cell features. So I'm going to omit that. This is for histopathology, which is most of the times it is important. Coming to some of our interesting cases which we really missed or about to miss the diagnosis. And as I told you, there are many challenges in diagnosis of squamous cell carcinoma, as you see here. And one of our cases, there is ameloblastoma on resection specimen, we got it. But in the biopsy, because this ameloblastoma was ulcerating through the mucosa was showing a lot of dysplastic changes. Now, ameloblastic epithelium, as it reaches the overlying mucosa, many times shows squamous areas, and it is on biopsy, it is totally difficult for us to differentiate it from squamous cell carcinoma if the epithelium shows some dysplastic features. So we always request clinicians, if you are thinking that this is not probably a squamous cell carcinoma, especially young patient, and clinically it doesn't look like squamous carcinoma. Clinically, it looks like mainly mandibular tumor. You have to give that information to us, because ameloblastoma, all of you know, you don't need to go for node dissection, which is a benign tumor, but on biopsy, it may be missed for squamous cell carcinoma. Now, this usually happens when this is clinically also it is inseparable from or indistinguishable from a squamous cell carcinoma, which is involving underlying mandible. So in that case, it becomes difficult, and we may end up calling a squamous cell carcinoma. Another thing is, many times any tumor beneath squamous mucosa can initiate hyperplastic and dysplastic reaction. This was one of our cases. This was a non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, but you see this was in the sinonasal cavity, and the overlying epithelium was showing so much of dysplasia and architectural disturbances that it was difficult to distinguish it from squamous cell carcinoma. Fortunately, we got two biopsies at one time. One was outside slide, one was in-house biopsy, and in-house biopsy showed nicely features of lymphoma. So the diagnosis was done in time without any mistake. Melanoma, I told you, can mimic like poorly differentiated squamous cell carcinoma, and many times we use some melanoma markers as well as some squamous cell carcinoma markers. Metastatic tumor is another big thing which are uncommon, but whenever they are there, sometimes they mimic squamous cell carcinoma, which even pathologists may not think about it if there is no history. But choriocarcinoma, young woman, no history of tobacco chewing. If we see something like this, we usually try to use some immunohistochemical markers before calling it squamous cell carcinoma. Another case, this was like, it looks like poorly differentiated squamous cell carcinoma or poorly differentiated adenocarcinoma, but there was a history of breast carcinoma. Any known history, any other malignant tumor, if we know that, we always try to exclude that before we call it as poorly differentiated squamous cell carcinoma. Now, another tumor which is very rare, it is not really common and it is not even malignant, but it is seen in head and neck mucosal sites. This is granular cell tumor. Now, the problem with this granular cell tumor is overlying epithelium shows just like but as you see here, I don't see any features of squamous cell carcinoma. If I don't get a deep biopsy, we are going to call it as hyperplastic squamous mucosa. Fortunately, this time the biopsy was big enough. We saw there is something here and had higher magnification. We saw some abnormal cells. We used immunohistochemistry. This is granular cell tumor, which is a benign one. We don't want to miss that because you can just excise it. At the same time, you don't want to call it as squamous cell carcinoma. This has been called as squamous cell carcinoma sometimes. Many times we have received this outside